told you that if you took the information that I gave you this morning, that it could totally change your life? Keep coming. It could totally change your life forever. How many would do it? Half of you. The other half of you were honest. I believe, perfect. Oh, $15 an hour, okay. Not bad for a police officer, really. No, I mean, it'd be a lot more than that, I thought. But I believe this morning, the message I'm going to share with you just over the next few moments, I believe this is something that if we would take this and we would apply it to our lives, I believe this will change our life. Now I want to clarify something. Up until this point, I have not done a good job applying this to my life. I was laying on a cruise ship, suffering for Jesus. And I was laying there. It was about 3 o'clock in the morning. Penny was sleeping. And I should have been sleeping, but I wasn't sleeping. And I couldn't sleep, and that hardly ever happens to me, maybe once or twice a year. And I couldn't sleep, and I'm lying there thinking about you and thinking about what I'm going to speak on when I come back. And that's in that moment of lying there, and it's very ironic, but in that moment of lying there in the morning, 3 in the morning, not being able to sleep, what I'm going to share with you today that's when this idea was born. And it's ironic because this morning I'm going to talk about rest. And I couldn't sleep at 3 o'clock in the morning, and I wasn't feeling very restful. But how many have ever heard the word Sabbath? You know, the Sabbath in the Bible is a day of rest. And I can remember growing up, and you guys are going to think this is funny, but I remember growing up, and I remember I was probably 5 years old, and I went into my parents, out in the living room, and I said to my parents, it was Sunday. And when we grew up, Sunday was the day of rest. How many remember those days? You rested on Sunday. You had a nap. Yep. They had a name for that. It was called the Pentecostal nap. Amen. No, everyone napped. And that's what you did, you know, and the people that are older, you know, my age and above, you're sitting there going, yeah, I remember that. And I remember this one day I went out and I said to my parents this Sunday, I said, I want to go ride my bike. And my mother and father, who aren't here today, said, do you think you should be, I'm 5, 6 years old. Do you really think you should be riding your bike on the Sabbath? What's the Sabbath? I'm 5. They said, you know, Sunday is like this day of rest. So they're asking a 5-year-old or 6-year-old if they should be riding their bike. And so I was about to say, of course I should be riding my bike. And my parents said, you should go in your bedroom and pray about this. I'm like, okay. Well, I was pretty sure I knew what God was going to say. Ride your bike. So I was young, so I don't remember all the details, but I remember going in my room and I remember earnestly really praying about this. And I remember coming out and my parents said, what did God say? And I remember telling them, it sounds crazy now, but I remember them telling me, said, I don't think I should ride my bike today. I was 5. And my parents were about as shocked as you are, I think, right now. And so I didn't. And for a long time, we didn't ride our bikes or anything on the Sabbath. We rested. I'm 43. That's like 37 years ago. A lot has changed in 37 years. I don't know, maybe it was about the age of 12. And I went and said, I'd like to ride my bike. And my parents said, you should go in your room and pray about it. So I did. And then I went and rode my bike. I don't know if God changed his mind or if I changed my mind. I don't know how that all worked. But I know that was the moment in my life where things really started to shift for me in the way that every day started just to become like every other day. I mean, how many enjoy going on vacation? It doesn't matter where you go. If you go on a cruise, if you go to Caracat, it doesn't matter where you go. How many love to go on vacation? You work, you get tired, and you get stressed. And then you want to take a break, so you go on vacation. How many of you ever noticed that partway through your vacation, you start to look forward to coming home? Why? Like, part of the reason was I was about halfway through my vacation on the cruise, and honestly, I'm lying there thinking, I wonder if I could swim home from here. Like, part of me was like, okay, it's been long enough. I want to go home now. I want to go home to be with my people. I want to go see my kids. I miss my kids. I want to go. No, I didn't want to come see my dogs, but I wanted everything else. And then we get home and you get 2 or 3 days in and you think then you're tired again because you think, well, this break wasn't long enough. That's the cycle for all of us. And the reason that's the cycle is because we are actually addicted to the adrenaline of go, 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 go. And so when we get off, we enjoy the first little bit of our break, and then halfway through the break, we start to crash. And we think, man, it'd be nice to go home, and this is me talking, it'd be nice to go home and help someone. All these people are strangers. I don't really care about them. No, that's not true. All these people are strangers, and my wife, she doesn't want my help. I just want to go home because we get addicted to the rush of work, to our phone going off and saying, somebody needs me. I mean, they just might want to borrow something, but somebody needs me. I'm going to talk to you something about something that I believe can change your life. I want you to know that it's not easy, but it's really, really important. You might be here today and you feel tired, you feel wore out, and you feel like giving up. And I believe that today can be a game changer for you and for me. I talked to somebody this week and we were talking about rest. And I said to them, I said, getting you to rest is like putting a pit bull in a room with a steak at the other end. You're the pit bull. The pit bull's going to eat the steak every time. And trying to get you to rest is like trying to hold back this pit bull. And part of that is like that for all of us. Because we live in a work where we work 7 days a week. And even if we don't have a job outside of the home, every day is a frantic pace of work. And then when you get that one day off, what do? You drive your kids to 23 lessons. 22 of them they don't even want to be in. You made them because you paid for them. Yeah, you're not going to quit soccer because I paid for it. And so my whole summer is going to stink because I paid $70 for soccer. And we're addicted to the rush. I believe that this could change our lives. I think we need to understand that our lives were meant to be a rhythm. And if your or my life played music, most of us would sound awful. There would be no rhythm. It would just be crashing and banging and not knowing what note is next. Do you know that every one of us should have a rhythm that is like our daily rhythm? Our weekly rhythm? Our monthly rhythm? Our yearly rhythm? But the problem is we don't have rhythm. We just have, for the most part, we just have chaos because we misunderstand rest. We think rest is laying on the couch and watching 10 hours of Netflix in a row. How many have ever got up from watching 10 hours of Netflix and thought, wow, do I ever feel rested? No one. You feel like garbage. Because that's not the idea. Some of you are like, you know what, all I really need is a good night's sleep. No. You can go to bed right now. I give you permission to lie down right now and go to sleep. You can sleep for 15 hours straight, and it will not solve your problem. I mean, you'll feel maybe a little better, but you will wake up and there will still be chaos. Because we don't have rhythm. I want to take a moment and I want to just write this down to you so you can see it. The goal for all of us is to be people that rest. But we all live in this balance between rest it's a miracle and productivity. We all live in this battle, this tension. Is that we know we need to rest, but we need to be doing something. We need to be productive. And that's the battle. And there's a good and a bad thing with rest and productivity. When you rest, now this word I'm going to have to look up how to spell. Rejuvenated. Just pretend it says rejuvenated. Okay? Rejuvenated. No, that's right. Rejuvenated. Or maybe I spelled it wrong there too. Okay, so rejuvenated. And then there's this lack of purpose. If we can rest properly, we can feel rejuvenated. If we don't rest properly, we can feel like we don't have purpose. People who retire go through this. They rush. And then they retire and they start to decompress. And then they fall into a deep lack of purpose. And people actually become depressed because they don't have this productivity. Productivity, if done right, gives us purpose. But if not done right, we can live in stress. The question is, does the rhythm of your life sound beautiful or is it chaotic? Because every one of our lives needs to have a rhythm. And the rhythm goes like this. Does your life have a rhythm? God calls us to rest. The truth is, He expects us to rest. It's one of His 10 commandments. Now, if it made the top 10, you've got to think it's pretty important. And if all sin is equal, which it is, then not resting is a sin. Now, we have a hard time with sin being, with all sin being equal. But I want you to turn to your neighbor and say, "You dirty sinner." I'm just kidding, but I've attended a lot of prayer meetings in my life, and not once in a prayer meeting have I witnessed someone say, "Please pray for me because I need to rest." I mean, we've had people pray for it because they couldn't sleep. But that's different than the rhythm we're talking about today. When it comes to the kingdom, and I just have this one quote, when it comes to the kingdom, tired people are dangerous people. Think about that. when it comes to you and your life, tired people are dangerous people. How many have ever made a bad decision when you're tired? You start saying things like, you know what, I deserve this because I'm tired. When it comes to the kingdom of God, tired people are dangerous people. In Exodus 20, verse 8, it says this: remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. Here's what we're not going to do today. We're not going to solve the theological problems about the Sabbath. We're not going to figure out, I'm not going to talk about what is the right day to have a Sabbath. We're not going to make a list of what you can or can't do on a Sabbath. You don't need to go home and pray if you can ride your bike today. Because all of that misses the point. What we want to do is we want to bring out the heart of rest by relating it to something in the Bible, a group of people. And we hear about them in Exodus 20, verse 8. This was spoken to a group of people who were slaves for 430 years, whose lives were valued on one thing: how many bricks they could make and how many bricks they could lay. That was their life. If you had been slaves for 430 years and God said to us, listen, I want you to take a day off every week, wouldn't you feel relieved? If you had worked 7 days a week, 365 days a year, laying bricks, and God said, I want you to take a day off every week, wouldn't you just be like, but we somehow have turned it and we've tried to make it about rules, what we can and can't do. I want you to read it differently. That it's not about rules, it's about this relief. Listen, you've been a slave for 430 years. I need you to take a rest. See, God freed us from all bondage. And if anything we do around rest brings us bondage instead of relief, it misses the point. That rest is supposed to bring us relief, not to put more rules on us. So I'm not here to say, you know what, when you go home, you need to sit in the corner for the rest of the day and you need to not do anything because this is the day that you are bored for the Lord. That's not the idea. Bored for the Lord. That's funny. That's not the idea. Israel didn't need more bondage. We're no different than them. So we're not going to read it just for the content. You need to read it for the emotion and to identify with these people. Pretend that you have been a slave for 430 years. In Exodus 5:15 to 19, then the Israelite overseers went and appealed to Pharaoh. Who have you treated your servants like this way? Your servants are given no straw, yet they are told to make bricks. They are being beaten. But the fault is with your own people, Pharaoh said. Lazy, that's what you are, lazy. That is why you keep saying, let us go and sacrifice to the Lord. You get to work, not given any straw. You must produce a full quota of bricks. The Israelite overseers realized that they were in trouble when they were told, you are not to reduce the number of bricks required for you to do each day. They lived in a culture of making bricks for people. And these people owned them. And they couldn't make enough bricks for the people who owned them. And if they couldn't make enough bricks, they were killed. Every day. 365 days. They didn't have stress leave. They didn't have sick days. They didn't have holidays. If someone that they loved died, they didn't get time off work. They didn't have compassionate care leave. They didn't have workers' compensation if they crashed their finger between two bricks. They didn't have maternity leave or paternity leave. They didn't have retirement. Life in Egypt was about one thing and one thing alone, making bricks. From birth to death, from sun up to sundown, 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, for 430 years. I don't know if you know this, but men and women are different. Wives historically have had value by the way they kept the house, how they kept the children, how well they kept the family schedule. Now they're expected to do all of this while working full-time. All of which are never-ending jobs. How can we expect our wives to rest if their value is based on how many bricks they can make? Husbands historically have been valued by how well the family eats, how well the family lives, how big the house is, how good the car is, how well the family is clothed, all which are never-ending jobs. How can a husband rest if his value is based on how many bricks he can make? A few weeks ago, a friend of mine posted on Facebook and asked people to finish this sentence, and here was the sentence. I value my spouse because... And just as he expected, most people responded with things like this. He accepts me even if I'm in a bad mood. I guess the question is this. What if one day he's had enough of your bad moods? He decides he's not going to be treated that way anymore. Will your value of him go down? Oh, he's a hard worker and the bills are always paid. What if he gets permanently injured at work and you have to go in be the breadwinner? Will your value of him go down? Someone said she's funny, she's smart, she's good looking. No, leave it to a man to say that. What if she looks good now but ages horribly? Will your value of her go down? Someone wrote, she balances me out. Well, what if you one day tip the scale? Will your value of her go down? The truth is, the common responses through the whole thread was, I value my spouse because of the bricks they can lay. We make bricks for our spouse because we love them. We want to bless them. We want them to be happy. But the only thing that should determine your spouse's value is the fact that they are fearfully and wonderfully made in the image of God. Part of rest is about finding ways to allow others to rest as well. In some households in this room, you are built so that one of you could never, ever, ever rest. It's the slave driver's job to put people in bondage. But God has called us out of bondage. Genesis 1:31, 2-3 says this. Or 1-3 says this. God saw all he had made was very good, and there was evening and there was morning on the sixth day. Thus the heavens and the earth were completed by all the vast array. By the seventh day God had finished all his work he had been doing. So on the seventh day he rested from all his work. Then God blessed the seventh day and made it holy because he had rested from all the work in creating. For the first 6 days God created, he achieved, he produced. God made bricks. But on the seventh day he rested. If God rested, that means he wasn't creating on that seventh day. He rested. The question is God still the creator even when he's not creating? Is God still God when he's resting? The answer to that, of course, is, of course he is. There should be this sense in all of us that God is God no matter what he's doing. And here's something that I want you to write down today. God designed us to work from rest, not to rest from work. Now, those doesn't sound that different, but it's very different. We were designed to work from our rest, not rest from our work. If I said, where do we start on this rhythm? Almost everybody would say we start here. We'd say, well, you have to work and be productive, then you can get stressed, then you can earn your work, your rest. And then when things, feel so good in vacation, you leave early, and then you go back so you can be productive. But the truth is, many of us live right here. Or right here. My challenge to us today is to figure out a way that we can start from rest. And when we're ready, we can live in purpose. And there's going to be times that are stressful. But you need to understand that some stress is good. The right amount of stress on a guitar string produces the right note. Not enough stress or too much stress makes it sound off tune. And then we need to let this stress propel us to rest. And our starting point needs to be, we need to be people who are good at rest so that we can be productive and we can live in this rhythm. Because I don't know about you, but all of us are getting older. And the pace that you could keep 20 years ago is not the pace that you can keep today. And we think we can keep the same rhythm, but we can't. One of the greatest lines in all of the Bible is the story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Just before they're about to be thrown into the fiery furnace, and Daniel 3:17 says this, "Our God will deliver us, but even if he doesn't, he's still God." So what if we take that and we turn it to ourselves? Am I still Pastor Troy, whether or not I preached last Sunday? Or does my worth come from that? Am I still Pastor Troy whether 150 people show up or 110 people show up? Is Joel still Joel when he's not swinging a hammer for his paycheck? Is Chris and Ronnie Lee still Chris and Ronnie Lee when the kids grow up and they move away from home? Or do we let our identity as parents become all who we are? Are we still ourselves even when we're not producing? Or is our value defined about how many bricks we can make? In Exodus, Israel wandered the wilderness, and it was this time of transition. They were coming out of this time where their life was defined by how many bricks they could make every day, and they were moving into something better. And God spoke to them. And this is what he said in Exodus 20, verse 8. "Remember the Sabbath day, keep it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all of your work. But on the seventh day is the Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you shall do no any other work. Neither you nor your son or your daughter, your male or your female servant, nor your animals nor your foreigner residing in your towns. For it is 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth and the sea, and all that is in them. But he rested on the seventh. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day to make it holy." Just a couple of things I want to observe for you and for me. Number one, God affirms work. In fact, he has a disdain for being lazy. So if you think that you can just live here, you need to understand God disdains that. And I'm trying not to say the word hate, but God disdains. It's very strong. In 2 Thessalonians 3:10 says this, Don't feed a lazy person because you'll only enable their laziness. Instead, let the lazy person feel hungry and maybe they'll be motivated to work. The Israelites worked 6 hours a day, 6 days a week, 12 hours a day, 72 hours a week. And they rested on the seventh. Even in perfection, before sin, God gave Adam and Eve jobs for them to do. Big jobs. They weren't just running around in their leaf bikinis. He gave them work to do. In Genesis 20, verse 20, he said to name all the animals. I have 2 children, and coming up with names with them was hard enough. He said, I want you to name all the animals. Name every kind of animal. This would be an exhausting task. In Genesis 2:15, tend to the garden. Imagine gardening without tools. Some of you in this room, you know what that's like. In Genesis 4:22, it tells us that Tubal-Cain forged all kinds of tools out of bronze and iron. Tubal-Cain was Adam and Eve's great grandson. 6 generations gardening without tools. This would have been physically demanding. God affirms hard work. And if you are not a hard worker, I want you to know that whoever's paying you, you are stealing from them. Number 2, God affirms rest. Rest in Hebrew is nuah. It means to cease work. God's expectation of mankind since creation was for us to be like him and set aside 1 day a week that will be different from any other day. God creates for 6 days. He creates man and woman at the end. 6th day. And what did they do the very next day? Rested. Before they did anything. They rested so they could be productive. They didn't produce and then rest from their work. But unfortunately, rest evolved into a list of things that we can and cannot do. By the time Jesus arrived, the people of his day constructed 39 activities for the Sabbath, and then dedicated a chunk of this book, the Mishnah, to those 39 things that weren't allowed to do. Here's some of them. They were allowed to move objects around, but they couldn't move them any more than 4 feet. So instead of them just saying, okay, I have time to rest, they started to make bondage and rules around it so they could move something 4 feet. So I guess if we needed to move a fridge, I could move it 4 feet, then you could move it 4 feet. We could get it eventually where it had to go. They were allowed to walk to their neighbor's house as long as their neighbor's house was less than 112 feet and a quarter inch away. They were allowed to be hospitable or to have people over, but the food had to be prepared the day before. To this day, Orthodox Jews practice the Sabbath. There's no writing, no erasing, no tearing, no business transactions, no driving or riding in cars or vehicles, no shopping, no using the telephone. No turning on anything that has electricity, or radio, TV, computer, alarm clock, air conditioner. No cooking, baking, or kindling a fire. No gardening or mowing grass, no doing laundry. A friend of mine on Facebook had one of his friends who isn't Jewish but wrote this on Facebook. Really enjoying my Sabbath today. Who knew one could be so rested by following the Torah or by following the law? And my friend Adam wrote, do you realize how many Sabbath laws you broke just to post this on Facebook? He said, you need to repent and go and try harder next week. See, because resting isn't about all of these rules that can be placed upon us. It's not about being bored for the Lord. Basically, mankind and religion has turned this idea of rest about being bored. But it never was the intention. The point was to cease work, To have one day that was different from every other day. To have one day that reminds us that your value doesn't come from how many bricks you can make. That your value doesn't come by how many meals you can have on the table when your husband comes home. That your value doesn't come from how big your paycheck is to bring home to your family. That your value comes from the Lord. It's not about how many bricks you can make. It's not about how many times you can drive your kids to sports when you and them both hate it. It's about knowing where your worth comes from. Rest is more than just having a nap. One day a week that reminds you that our value doesn't come from how many bricks you lay. It reminds us that we are not machines. One day a week that reminds us that we matter to God, not because of what we can do, but because He loves us. Hebrews 4:11 says this, strive as you enter into rest. Ancient rabbis taught this. Sabbath gives us the energy to survive the voices that consume our world. I mean, how relatable is that? It gives us the energy to survive the voices that consume our world. We all hear voices in our head. A lot of them, they sound like this. Mommy, look! Mommy, look! Mommy, look! Mommy, look! From these little people that live in our house. Honey, come here. Honey, come here. Where's my socks? Where's my shirt? Can't find this. It's right there, Troy. What about these voices? The dishes need to be done. The laundry needs to be done. The grass needs to be cut. The car needs an oil change. Go to bed, Johnny. Do your homework, Johnny. Clean up your toys, Johnny. I wish I never had you, Johnny. No. That part's not true. That's why when you have parents who have 2 or more children, that's why your left eye twitches all the time. We need to ask ourselves a question. Where have we missed God because of all these voices? Genesis 28:16 says, God was with me the whole time, I just didn't know it. If I go to a hotel room and spend the night because I need to get away from my wife, no, I'm just kidding. If I'm away traveling and I have to stay in a hotel room, I sleep with the TV on all night. You walk into a room, you turn the TV on, you turn the computer on, you turn this on, you turn this, because we don't have silence. What have we missed because of other people's voices? You need to picture rest like this. You're driving down the highway and your vehicle suddenly gets a rock thrown up on it and it cracks your windshield. How many have ever had that happen? I have 2 on my windshield right now. So you have 2 little cracks on a little crack on your windshield. And if you're like me, you just wait. Oh, it's going to be fine. And then the winter comes. And it cracks. That's what happens if you don't go to Speedy Auto Glass to fill in the chip. The chip will begin to crack, and before long you've got this spider all across. And then the safety of your vehicle, I hear, is compromised. See, the Sabbath is a day where we take a break from the constant voices that create cracks in your soul. It's a day where we stop and we mend. It's a day where we remember that God wants to spend time with us without us doing anything for Him. Because it's not about how many bricks we can make. When Jesus was baptized in Matthew 3:17, God said in a loud voice, "This is my Son. I am well pleased." You need to understand, God said that about His Son before His Son did anything. This is my Son. And I love Him because He's my Son. Sabbath is a day to remind us of that. The big question for us is this. Are you okay with yourself even when you're not achieving? And if we're honest, the answer for most of us is no. We got to be the best grandparent, the best parent, the best this, the best that. We got to be a good employee. We got to do this. We got to be the best mom. We've sold our soul to our children. We hear people say it all the time. They're my life. They're my life. You know what? They're your life, and that's why you feel so exhausted. I'm not saying lock them in the basement and don't feed them. But it's okay. Are you okay with yourself when you have to say no to things that you can't afford? Are you okay with yourself even if you gain 20 pounds? Are you okay with yourself even when you're not accomplishing anything? Since we're addicted to accomplishment, achievement, and action, I challenge you today in closing. And I'll ask Julian, you'll lead us in the last song that you sang. I'm going to challenge you to something that I know is going to be very, very difficult. Some of you in this room, you've got 3, 4 children, and rest is just a distant memory. But I'm not talking about just having a good night's sleep. That's not the answer. I'm going to ask you to figure out this week, how do I figure out how to live a life that has rhythm? That I work out of my rest. I don't have to rest for my work. Yeah. I promise, if you can figure out how to take one day, do yourself a favor. Start with half a day. I promise you, you'll be better for it. But I must warn you that it's very, very difficult. Scientifically, it's very difficult. If you're not in the habit of taking one day a week of rest, here's what you'll notice. The first week, you're going to feel depressed. Because the drive and the addiction is there. You'll miss the rush. For me, it's the rush of ministry and the rush of helping people. You'll feel like, what's going to happen if I'm not there? The truth is, we have a hard time we live in productivity because the truth is, we think the world can't live without us. I got a surprise for you. The world's going to do just fine if you take a day off. Troy Matchett. You'll feel depressed. You'll miss the rush. What'll happen if I'm not there? You can't even turn your phone off without feeling guilty. I don't know what to do with myself. Then the enemy will begin to speak to you. You don't deserve rest. You don't work hard enough. For me, it's Troy. Church is all about the bricks you can make. And right now, you're not making any bricks. I want you to know, and I know this is going to sound bad, when you start to really rest, it's going to be horrible. Science proved this to be true. We're addicted to the go, go, go. Our brain actually releases serotonin. When we don't produce enough serotonin, we get drained and depressed. That's why when you do take a day off, by 2 p.m., you feel restless and you just say, you know what, I got to go to work. Or I got to go do something. That's why when people work in high-stress jobs, they're encouraged to take at least 2 weeks and not 1 week. Because the first week is just to decompress your body. It takes 1 week for your body to readjust the serotonin levels in order to actively rest during the second week. It's why most couples get sick when they go on their honeymoon. Because for the months leading up, it was rush, 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 rush. To build up the serotonin in your body. And then when it's time to relax, our body stops producing it and we crash. And it shocks the system. And we get sick. How many have ever been on a holiday and you come home thinking, that was not long enough? Do you know why? That was not long enough. I'm just going to give you 4 thoughts. If you have your bulletin, there's room to write them. They'll be on the screen. And these are 4 like Hebraic thoughts. The Sabbath is a day to get the energy we need for the other 6 days. You can just leave that up. The Sabbath is a day for God to mend and put back together what was broken. The Sabbath is a day for complete honesty with God. The Sabbath is a day that doesn't look like the other 6. It hits the reset button in your brain and lets you start over. The question is, do you have 1 in 7 days that's unlike any other day? Probably not. If not, why not? The question, I guess, is, are you willing to start now? If it's a day that looks like any other day, you need to understand that it's going to look different to everybody. If you're a parent, rest will be a day without driving your children everywhere. If you're a homemaker, rest will be a day without doing laundry. If you're a working parent, rest will be a day without working overtime or working extra. If you're a business owner, rest will be a day without checking emails, answering your work phone. Do you have 1 day in 7 where you don't check your email or answer your phone? If not, why? The truth is, the reason I don't is because I think that the world can't last without me. How arrogant is that? I mean, we have 6 days to check our email, and we do that 45 times a day. Why don't we make 1 day different? I believe that if we can make these changes and stick to them, rest will save our lives, and God will reveal Himself to us. We just need to realize that He's God, we're not. We need to have 1 day where we put the honey-do list away, where we do the laundry and dishes so that our wives can have rest. Can I have an amen? We need to have 1 in 7 where we pretend like the list is done even though it's not. Because you need to understand, when you wake up, the world will still be returning the next day. What day of the week are you going to decide that people can't get in touch with you? What day of the week, if I texted you, it'd be pointless? What day of the week are the chores not going to matter? It's no wonder that we're burnt out and dropping the ball on all of our commitments. It's the pressure that we put on ourselves. God's designed you and me to take 1 day of 7 that's different than every day. And when we do that, we'll find that the pressure comes off. I bless you today to know that the Sabbath is a day where you can live like our work is done, even though it isn't. I bless us today so that the Sabbath is a day where we can remember that He's God and we're not. And the world will go on the same, even if we don't make one single brick. I bless you today to take a Sabbath, to have one day in 7 that's different than any other day. To remind yourself to be whole. Why don't we stand? Julian's just going to lead us in this song once, and I just want you to close your eyes. Even if you don't sing along, just let it speak to you.